70 tons of rice out of the 18,000 received were destroyed on Tuesday by authorities in Ivory Coast. The Ministry of Trade says this operation is expected to continue daily until all of it is gone. Consumers associations in Ivory Coast had raised concerns with the stock after they learned the rice had been refused in ports in Ghana and Togo. While it isn't clear exactly what was wrong with the rice, the government says anomalies were detected and decided to destroy the cargo at a facility just outside the capital.
KCKQ correspondent Louise West. Well, people were slightly injured after lightning struck the Acropolis in Athens during a rainstorm. No indication of any damage to the monuments of that ancient city. More on these stories at townhall.com. I'm John Scott.
The following is an American Matters Media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of American Matters Media.
Hello, and welcome again to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. My name is Brendan Trainor. I am your co-host today, along with Leland Faegre.
Do we have Jennifer or not? Is she going to be with us?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
We haven't heard from her, unfortunately. Okay. We usually have Jennifer Terhune Green call in from Seattle, but she hasn't done so far today. If she does call in, we'll let you know. And we have the first really warm day that I can remember, where I don't have to even wear a sweater or jacket today.
Yeah, the lake level area is receded from snow now. I mean, the meadows are. It's hard to find a patch of snow at lake level right now. So. Okay.
Well, as usual, there is quite a bit to talk about on this warm spring day here in Reno Town Mall. And we have several things going on in the news media, of course. The main occupation of the talking heads is about the release of the Mueller report tomorrow and how the Democrats are going to respond to it. And everybody's going back and forth. And they're still, of course, most of them still talking about trying to impeach the president over the report. And we just don't know at this point. It's all speculation.
But I think it will be a vicious report. I mean, he had 19 Clinton aficionados on his team, on Mueller's team. So they weren't sitting there figuring out a way to compliment.
Yeah, and I don't trust Mueller myself either. I mean, he's.
Oh, he was there to do damage.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly. I mean, he knew as soon as he took his seat on day one that there was no case for collusion against Trump, and he would sit there for the next few years anyway.
Yes. And, Donald is the elected president of the United States. Has been for 2 years. We've been subjected to this slow-moving coup. And did you notice that Eric Swalwell is declared for president of the United States?
I did. I don't know how I did, but I did. Who's next? Schiff?
Yeah. His platform actually calls for the confiscation of so-called, what they like to call, weapons of war, which is military, in quotes, assault rifles.
Right. And he would jail those who would not subject to confiscation.
Right. Yep, but he would allow people that already have assault rifles to store them at a gun range or something like that. Or yes, isn't that nice of him?
He's a real nice guy. And there was a story, I saw it from the Gun Owners of America this morning, a real-life story of a group, I think it was 5 armed men who busted into a private residence, and the owner of the residence had an AK-47, killing 3 of the 5.
Oh.
Attaboy.
Yeah, exactly. And yep.
I love hearing stuff like that.
Yes. Well, hopefully, if he ever does get near the reins of power, which I seriously doubt. He has such an abrasive personality. He's almost like the creepy porn lawyer.
Swalwell?
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine him as a reasonable person when you listen to him in the context of collusion and Russians. I mean, it is it borders on sociopathic behavior, I think.
Yeah, and he's typically representative. He's from California. I think the Bay Area or somewhere, or is it Southern California?
I think it's Southern California.
All right.
Yeah.
So he is so typical of a one-party state where he has no real checks on what he says, that he can get away with the way he does.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them over there.
Yes. The other presidential candidate in the news so far this last week was Mayor Pete, who declared for the presidency. Mm-hmm. Pete Buttigieg. Did you know his father was a Marxist professor?
Academic, yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The apple.
What are the odds?
Yes, I know. And
but he's a concert pianist.
Oh, of course, he's extremely talented.
He's extremely talented.
He learned Norwegian just to read a book.
What a guy!
I know. And so he's the new flavor of the month for the Democrats, and they're all swooning over him.
Well, they got to have some socialism all the time.
Yes.
So he's the latest socialist that they can get excited about. And
yes. I think Beto must feel like the guy who thought he had a hot date to the prom, and then she rejected him at the last minute. I mean,
right now,
yes.
Yeah, it does seem like that. Well, there's no skateboards at every venue, and I think that's what he misses. Got to have a skateboard for that guy.
And speaking of skateboards...
Yeah. What a nice segue.
Yeah.
See how I just set it up for you.
Yes. Skateboarding was one of the awful things that Julian Assange was accused of the Ecuadorian government of committing while he was in asylum in their embassy for 7 years, basically in solitary confinement, deprived of sunlight. He should have a vitamin D deficiency. And they said he skateboarded a lot at all hours of the night, and his cat was spying on people.
Because that's what they do.
Yes.
Everybody knows that owns a cat. They spy.
Yeah. And of course, the $4 billion loan from the IMF to Ecuador had absolutely nothing to do with their decision to break the asylum. Talk about 30 pieces of silver. That's a little bit more than 30 pieces of silver, but still not enough to do what they did.
And precious metals fell out of bed yesterday. I don't know if you watch precious metals, but and gold and silver really took a hit yesterday.
They took a heat dive?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the central banks must be unloading some or something.
Yeah, it's usually an indication of market forces somewhere and probably central bank behavior, but we know we don't have any gold in our own central bank.
Or on Wall Street, and the vaults underneath Wall Street are supposed to be full of gold, but nobody knows. Nobody knows what's in Fort Knox. But who cares? It's all electronic entries now.
It is.
So why should we worry?
Yep.
Alfred E. Newman, what? Me worry? Yeah. And there are talks of a possible recession, and of course the mainstream people are in denial, just like they were in 2008. And we'll be back after the break.
Hi there, Leroy Marshall here to welcome you to our new world-famous Marshall Mint.
To find out what's hot and happening, join Lady J for Smooth Jazz Tune-Up.
Join me Saturdays, 10 to noon, here on America Matters.
Unable to listen to the whole show? A recording of today's program will be available later today. Visit americamatters.us and click on the podcast link. Now, back to the show.
Hi, and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. My name is Brendan Trainor. I'm here today with co-host Leland Faegre, and we were talking about the expulsion of Julian Assange from the embassy in London, the Ecuadorian embassy, and his arrest. I understand he is in a notorious prison in London now, the Dalmora prison. Dingmore, yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm. And he is... not expected to get a lot of sunlight there either.
No.
One thing we wanted to talk about is that you might have heard, if you were quick enough to catch it on the news a while ago, that a journalist who quit NBC because he declared publicly that they were too warmongering. And I'm looking for his name here. But at any rate, William Arkin, he left NBC over its warmongering, tried to get published an article in several publications about how this was not really about what it's supposed to be about. It's not really about the hack into the computer to assist, or the attempt to hack, because apparently he never really got into the computer, and that's a little bit complicated. It has to do with passwords and stuff. There's a good article in Wired that gets into the nuts and bolts of that, if you'd like to read that. But it was most likely about the Vault 7 leak. Mm-hmm. Yes, and that occurred in late at night 2016 or 2017. And that was a major hack because nobody had done that to the CIA in decades. Nobody had penetrated the CIA since the 70s.
And that happened under Brennan and Comey's watch.
Yes, it did. And what it did was it exposed the CIA's own hacking abilities, including the program they had, which would leave false notes. When you program, you write notes, under the code.
Yeah.
And so the notes would be written in Cyrillic or Chinese characters.
To make it appear as though it came from somewhere else.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's very clever.
Yes. And Julian published a couple of those, not so major ones, a couple of minor ones just to show he had them. And then he offered to come to America if they would grant him immunity to talk with the FBI.
People forget that.
Yes. About how the DNC, how WikiLeaks obtained the DNC hacks.
He was willing to cooperate.
Yes, which he maintains were not from a state. He has always maintained they were not from any state, including Russia, and were most likely not even hacks. They were most likely, according to people that have also done forensic examination of the files, most likely downloaded to a DVD or a flash drive. Mm-hmm. By a disgruntled member of the DNC who was mad about what they were doing to Bernie Sanders.
This is what Assange told Sean Hannity, wasn't it?
Yes.
In his interview.
Yes. And it could possibly, we can't say categorically, it could possibly tie into the Seth Rich murder, or that could be a coincidence that he was murdered. But
I think there's a definite correlation.
Oh, you are so conspiracy-minded.
I know, I'm proud of that.
But at any rate, it was then FBI Director Comey that at the last minute nixed the deal, and Assange was not allowed to come into the country and explain and show his evidence.
Because he had to be put down.
Yes, he did.
Because he's embarrassing everybody.
Yes. He
went after everybody, both sides.
I know.
Both sides hated him.
Yep.
He's got to be a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
How bad can he be?
Yes. So that's another little twist to this story. And I know the Ron Paul Institute immediately tweeted, "We're off the Trump train," after his election.
I saw that.
After his
I saw that
arrest.
Story. Yeah.
So he's facing a long uphill battle. It was probably going to take years. First, he has to try to fight the British charge, which is basically breaking bail, as I understand it. And then that might get him 6 months in prison, which by the time it's resolved would possibly be time served.
And you haven't factored in Sweden.
Yes, then there's Sweden.
Now, are they going to actually bring back those charges?
We haven't heard yet.
Yeah.
I've heard different things about those charges. I've heard that it was a honeypot sting. And the charge basically, in Sweden, it's considered rape if you have unprotected sex without telling the other person or deceiving the other person that you're partnering with. And the allegation, I believe, is that he broke a condom. And that is the charge. In other words, he was actually trying to produce all kinds of little Assanges to populate Europe with.
That sounds like a CIA desk.
Yes.
Somebody at the desk over at Langley came up with that.
And according to the reports I've seen, they did not find his DNA on the condom. So that may be why Sweden eventually did drop the charges, but they still he still could be extradited to Sweden. This is all up in the air. If he's extradited to Sweden, then whether he'll go to America would be the next battle. And
it
that
protracts the entire legal process.
Exactly.
But I think the most likely occurrence or justification for Sweden's behavior is that it was a CIA event. That woman was a plant, just as some of the plants that have been revealed recently in the Mueller report.
I thought only the Russians did that.
No, it turns out we taught them.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people make that mistake. But as you point out, it looks like Assange's best bet is a Labour Party victory in England, and I have to give Brendan credit for this, which is where Theresa May is working hard to bring about. That's a priceless statement there. It sure looks that way.
Yes. And so I mean, Brexit has gotten an extension until October now, but it still doesn't look very good for them resolving anything. They're still pretty much deadlocked. And the thing is that the British people voted for Brexit, but the elites don't want it, apparently.
Nope, it's part of their globalist master plot, and they won't come clean on that because it would blow the whole thing up if they were to actually communicate that to us. And so it remains for us to figure out. And that's what it really was. It was designed to fail.
Yep. And so what can we say about Jeremy Corbyn? He is, as like most socialists, he says he's against foreign wars and interventions, and he has also expressed outrage about the Julian Assange affair. So it is a good bet that if he does get elected, and the polls show if the elections were held today, he likely would be the elected, in Parliament and then Prime Minister.
Well, it's a fairly static set of circumstances at the moment, because Theresa May is not going to be there forever. If she stays, throughout the day, every day there's a threat that suggests that she won't be around any longer. So it could very well be that Corbyn comes up, he is a third-time loser, right? Isn't he? He's already lost twice.
I think so, yeah.
So I don't see any future for him. But he did say that Assange should not be extradited to the United States, whatever that means.
Well, the fear is that the actual charge so far is relatively minor. A conspiracy to hack into a government computer.
They got nothing, I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think they have a blessed thing on him.
And but the worry is that if he does get extradited to America, that all of a sudden they're going to pull out other charges under the Espionage Act. Under the Espionage Act, you cannot really have a trial, not really have a good chance to defend yourself.
Well, he is exposed and made very clear that his enemy is the deep state. And the deep state is very powerful. What did Schumer say about going after Trump? They'll get you 6 ways to Sunday, or words to that effect. Very powerful role of what Americans are coming to terms with now, and has been in effect for many, many decades.
Yes. And, I was at a Ron Paul conference last year, when Assange came to us on a screen over Skype. And if you remember, after the Vault 7 leak that we've been referring to, now Secretary of State, then CIA Director Mike Pompeo, his pomposity, said that WikiLeaks was a non-state intelligence agency. And when Julian was on the screen with us, he said, well, I think the CIA is a state-run non-intelligence agency.
Yeah, it's a good play on words. Very accurate, I think.
Yes. And so, we'll just have to see what happens with Julian. I know Pamela Anderson is very upset. She visits him all the time. And
she called Britain our bitch, a word to that effect.
Yes.
So, she has a particular interest in this. And I think all Americans should, really.
Yes.
Because they have been coming at, the deep state has been coming from a space that promotes world government and the status quo. And anything that steps in their way is, for them, worthy of the kind of extreme measures that you're seeing unfold with Julian Assange.
Yes, they don't take any prisoners. They're completely ruthless, and they have such a smiley face facade, and then underneath it is that devil emoji.
And he's made a lot of enemies on both sides of the aisle.
Yes,
So
a courageous man for sure. And so when we come back to the break, we have lots more to talk about. We had the election in Israel, and we had other...
did we have an election in Israel?
Well, it's according to Donald in Las Vegas, he said that Netanyahu was our prime minister.
He's right about that. That's exactly what he has been to us. Stay with us.
Are you planning to move? Paragon Real Estate Resources can help you sell or buy a home anywhere. This is America Matters Media
on AM 1180 KCKQ,
a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now, back to the show.
Hi, welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. My name is Brendan Trainor. I'm here with Leland Faegre to discuss the news of the day from a freedom perspective. And before we do that, though, I'd like to give a shout-out to our primary sponsor, Reno Computer Services. Reno premier internet computer repair, malware removal, and data recovery service. They perform routine maintenance and virus and malware removal, data recovery, and they specialize in a preventive approach for businesses and individuals that delivers reliable, consistent, and secure PC performance. Call them now at 775-737-4400, or you can get them on the web at www.renocomputerservices.com. So we were talking very briefly as a lead-in to the election in Israel, where Benjamin Netanyahu defeated his opponent, two former generals, and there really wasn't much space between them. And even though Netanyahu is not a civil libertarian by any means, he apparently may have been the better choice for even the people in Gaza, because he does not unleash total war on them. Even though some of their bombing seems like total war, recently he has pulled back somewhat. And the generals that were opposed to him their rhetoric was even more warlike than Netanyahu's.
Well, I think you're right about that, because the Arab turnout was very, very low in the election. So they were either indifferent. They certainly weren't animated to vote against Netanyahu.
Right. Yes. And the Israeli situation was compounded by several things. First of all, Netanyahu has a relationship with Donald Trump. His pictures with the Donald were plastered all over Israel. And by moving the embassy to Jerusalem, that was a major victory. And then also when Donald reversed decades of U.S. policy and recognized the sovereignty of Israel over the Golan Heights, which they have occupied since the 1967 Six-Day War, which was the major victory and founding of the Israeli government in Israel as a viable thing. Before that, it was up in the air whether Israel would survive. He was surrounded by enemies. After the Six-Day War, it became clear that Israel would survive, and the policies of the world changed dramatically. And so the Golan Heights, though, were occupied, and the rest of the world and the UN and the European nations and Russia were appalled at what Donald did, because it circumvented international law and international consensus. But what would be the ultimate result of all this? We're not sure. So far, the status quo is just legalizes what was in effect at this time. But there's no doubt that things are changing, and that's despite all these interventions. Now, another thing that happened in the Middle East is that President Trump declared the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to be a terrorist organization. And that's
very interventionist.
Yes, that is very interventionist. It's a de facto declaration of war. Yes, and it puts the major states, part of the government, armed services. I would kind of consider them to be similar in so many ways to our Marines. I mean, they have their own Navy, their own Air Force, although Iran doesn't have much of either, but they do have their own boats and planes, and they are the forefront, the Quds Force, or the Special Ops of Iran. But their main function has been to train the Shia militias in both Syria and Iraq. Which we don't care for. Even in
that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, even in Iraq, Vice President Pence went over there and tried to get them to denounce the Shia militia and the Iranian and those forces, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and he was completely rebuffed by the Iraqi government. They said that the militia did as much or more than we did to defeat ISIS. So it's a losing proposition. And meanwhile, over there in the Levant, they've just announced that a major railroad is being built.
Isn't that interesting development?
Yes, between Iran and Syria and Iraq.
How long before those railroad tracks are destroyed?
Bombed or strafed? Or yes, Saboteur Central. But this, I heard a quote from a Russian general that America acts like a dinosaur with a bird brain. In other words, that we're just completely going in and wrecking things, but things turn out worse than they were in the beginning before we did it.
This is the unipolar mind.
Yes, it is. It's like
it's evident in foreign policy. It's the deep state still in control or desperately trying to hang on to control.
Yeah, it's like trying to be like Pharaoh in the Ten Commandments movie when he says, "So it is written," and so it is said, and so it is written. I think he said, right? And so it shall be done. So it is written, and so it shall be done. Or like Obama with his pen and his phone. We keep thinking that people are like, as Adam Smith famously said, like pieces on a chessboard, and all we have to do is move them around, and they'll do what we say,
and they'll like us for it.
Yeah. So. The things are not working out quite as well as he expected all over the world. Another thing, of course, is Venezuela.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Yes. The major intervention in Venezuela has stalled, and it doesn't look promising now. Random Guaido is supposedly, according to the news, running around in Venezuela trying to get the army to defect. And in the first few days of the attempted coup, I think it was something like 1,500 superior officers defected, and that slowed down to a trickle. That's not happening anymore.
No. And so much so that the Soviets dropped 100 troops on their airport tarmac, last week or a week before?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, he's now protected by Soviet soldiers on top of everything else.
And there are rumors of Cuban soldiers or Cuban intelligence being there to keep the generals in line. We don't know if that's true. I've heard people try to debunk that too. But at any rate, it does not appear. And the generals, at least the upper echelon, as we say, whenever there are sanctions, people at the top are going to make money. And so they're going to be involved in smuggling, even drug smuggling. So now when representatives from Venezuela went over to the Middle East, we were accusing them of arranging drug smuggling pipelines to get cash for the government.
Yeah, monopolistic transportation and product service and the rest of it.
Yes. So, I mean, if you starve the people, they have to get their money somewhere, and so it's only going to solidify the hold of the government on power. And it's very, very cruel. I mean, President Trump is for the working person in America. He says it over and over again, and he has done good things for the American working people. But he's gratuitously cruel to working people in other countries if they stand in the way of, as you say, the deep state or his foreign policy.
Right, and that is who's in charge there,
Yes.
But he's made it clear his preference is for soldiers to remain in the United States, not in Afghanistan and Syria or anywhere else. So why are they still there? Obviously, the effect of the deep state.
Yeah. I mean, we were celebrating his decision to remove troops from Syria, and then we hear that, 200 are going to remain, and now I hear 1,000 are going to remain. It's a token force, but it's an open wound. It's keeping the wound open, picking at the wound in Syria, and not allowing the Syrian people to fully recuperate.
Well, the worst is Afghanistan.
Yes.
I mean, that's a nation-building episode of human history that is just beyond comprehension. It just cannot possibly work. And we still try. How much have we put into that now? Nearly $1 trillion has gone into that. It's just maniacally stupid.
The Pentagon loses $1 trillion almost every year.
Well, they don't think about it. Yeah. It's only from our perspective that we can actually count.
$1 trillion is like a whole warehouse filled to the top with pallets of cash.
What was it that Everett Dirksen said? A billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Yeah. And so the fact is that we are belligerent, but we're losing. And the world is becoming more multipolar, and there isn't very much we can do about it, but we still think that we can dominate the world. That is the rhetoric. It's always domination.
And I think that the deep state hopes to hang on until Trump leaves. That's their goal.
Oh, sure.
And they think that if they can get to that point where he's no longer there, that they can reemerge as the dominant forces across their spectrum of influence and spectrum of power. I don't see that going back. I don't see us going back from this point.
From the deep state? Or
yeah. I just don't see us turning back on what has already happened. It'll be Ivanka or it'll be a Trump Jr. I mean, it is a dynasty, a potential dynasty going forward. And people within the ranks can also see that policy-wise that this is the trend we need to go to remain a nation state, which is anathema to the deep state, who prefer the global design preference. So,
yeah, and they're not going to give up without a fight, and they're not. They probably don't even consider it a fight at this point. They probably just consider it a skirmish because they've hemmed in the forces of nationalism to a great extent, even in the Congress, even within his own party.
It will be interesting to see how far Barr gets in his investigation. Stay with us.
And suddenly, one...
This is America Matters Media
on AM 1180 KCKQ,
a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
Hello, welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. And this is Brendan Trainor, your host, along with Leland Faegre. And we haven't really touched on the immigration issue today, which is in the news because of another crisis, this time in Yuma, Arizona, as apparently 2 busloads, now they're driving buses across the border, of asylum seekers came and dumped 300 people on them. And, there's that word, dump. Donald Trump has floated the idea, President Trump, of taking the asylum seekers and dumping them, according to the left.
Because they're just rubbish.
Yeah, into the sanctuary cities such as, Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco or, the Los Angeles and other sanctuary cities across the country who have been saying for years that they welcome illegal immigrants with open arms. And so he's calling their bluff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's very good at that.
Yes. It is a typical Trump move, and it it's got everybody talking about the situation and
reacting, and that's what he likes to do.
Yes, exactly. He likes to stir the pot until it explodes. But actually, from my point of view, I think it's not only poetic justice, as we've been saying here, but I think it's actually could be, if it was interpreted correctly, a step in the right direction, because I think immigration should be more federalist. And I think, the problem with big government is that, the cost of something that the government wants is borne by everybody. If you don't have children, you still have to pay property tax to send other people's children to schools.
Public schools, yeah.
Yeah, it's one obvious example.
That was one of the campaign issues that I ran on when I was seeking office.
Yes. And if some states are friendlier to immigration, why shouldn't they take more people? I mean, the system should be structured that way. And then why have these immigrants with their needs and concerns put into areas of the country that don't welcome them, and that paying for these services would be a burden. It makes sense to me to federalize it. Of course, it was federalized up until the 1880s when the Supreme Court issued a Roe v. Wade type of judgment saying that the penumbras and emanations from the Constitution meant that the federal government has a monopoly over immigration policy, not just naturalization. But that's the pickle we're in now. But the Congress itself could enact some kind of federalist system to try and...
well, not this Congress.
No, I know. I know. There's a lot of things we would like to see, but then you have to say, well, not now, not this Congress. Yeah. So, but anyway, let people put their actions and their pocketbooks where their mouths are.
Well, it's a provocation, and I love that about him. He forces the issue, and we're probably going to see a lot more of that going forward as long as he's sitting in the Oval Office. It's really interesting to watch. Very exciting.
So we've been talking a little bit about the Democratic candidates. What do you think about former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld declaring?
Bill Weld, one of my favorite subjects. I mean, the Libertarian Party was completely overtaken by Bill Weld, and they will never come back as a result of that decision. Whatever you think about Gary Johnson, his insistence on Bill Weld as the running mate was the worst thing that ever happened to that party. Here's a CFR globalist sitting in Blair House. That's basically what Gary Johnson was insisting upon. Now, why would you have a globalist who doesn't care about the United States? And that's basically what these CFR members who are part of this project, this global design, believe. That it was one of the most atrocious decisions I ever saw. And I don't think we'll ever live it down. I remain a libertarian, but I just don't see how we can recover from that kind of stupid.
And he has a history of abandoning the party. I mean, he tried to run in New York State. They have fusion candidacies where you can run on more than one ticket. You can run on a conservative ticket and a Republican ticket if both of those groups will have you. And he tried to run as a Republican and a Libertarian, and it's a Democratic state. I mean, he probably wouldn't have won, but he would have, like he is now saying, he would have been able to confront the issues. But then when the Republicans turned him down, he abandoned the Libertarian Party completely and just left them in the dirt.
Yeah, no, he's not one of us.
Yeah.
And what I heard about the convention was that Gary Johnson actually insisted on Weld as his running mate. And I thought, what the hell is he thinking? What is going on in his brain? Regardless of his credentials, stated credentials, when he did that, it was just so revealing about Gary Johnson. And the effect was disastrous.
Yeah. Although it did give them a veneer of respectability.
Well, that was his point. That's why I think that's why he did it.
Yes.
But still, I mean, it was just on its face stupid.
Well, the other stupid move was Congressman Barr from Atlanta.
It was happening. That trend was happening long before William Weld. But that really killed it. That killed the party, I think. I don't think they can recover from that.
Well, we'll see. Doesn't look good.
I mean, he was for gun control. I mean, I know he's from the socialist state of Massachusetts, but
right.
Honestly, you can't market yourself as a credentialed big R, capital R Republican even, with that kind of a background. Except to whom? Maybe people who don't know any better, or maybe to Democrats. I don't know. I think he's just in there to destroy Trump. That's his goal.
Yeah. Oh, that's obviously his goal. He doesn't like Trump. I remember during the campaign when he said that Hillary Clinton was a dedicated public servant.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Oh, he's got a bunch of that stuff. I don't have it in front of me, but I mean, he's de-credentialed as any kind of a freedom lover. I can tell you that.
And I have family in Massachusetts, and my nephew is a successful moderate Republican, and he and his friends, they liked Bill Weld. They were excited about Bill Weld when he ran for president.
Did they say why?
Because he was governor of Massachusetts, and because they're not hardcore liberty people like I am. I mean, in Massachusetts, you're not probably very few of those. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's basically a semi-socialist state, if there is such a thing as semi-socialism. So they, they like Barr. I mean, Weld. I mean, before Massachusetts legalized pot, I mean, I'm sure he was advocating for decriminalizing or legalizing pot, and he,
well, that's how these guys
probably cut some taxes,
yeah.
But then. It's like you said, it's lukewarm gruel. It's it's not the stuff of which changes in consciousness are made.